All right. Welcome to another episode of the Radical Hospitality Show. I'm your host, Zeke Freeman. Today, we have a very special guest and a good friend of mine, Steve Van Diest. He is the president of Acumen in the Front Range region, which encompasses Denver and surrounding communities in Colorado. His professional journey spans over 14 years in nonprofit leadership with Crew, during which he lived in Chile and Spain and Mexico, some really cool places. He transitioned to the private sector, where Steve co-founded and led two businesses in the sleep industry, a franchise multi-state retail mattress concept that expanded nationally, including 4 Denver locations, and a B2B and B2C e-commerce natural pillow manufacturing business before he took an exit on that. For nearly 4 years since then, he has served as an executive coach to CEOs and business owners, focusing on their growth and development at Acumen, including us at Root Architecture and Development. I've gotten to know Steve very well. He's been very influential and helpful in our journey. And most important to him, he's been married for 31 years and a father of 4 amazing children. So, Steve, welcome to Radical Hospitality.
So fun to be here. I wish I was sitting in your studio. Your back wall looks really warm. Mine's got a destructive sword on it. So I don't know if swords are the best way to start a hospitality group. Like, hey, come on over. I've got a sword. But there's a story behind our swords. When we lived in Spain, I fell in love with the city of Toledo outside of Madrid. And they make some of the best swords. And I got one. And then my boys each got one. It's a Templar knight sword for the soldiers that guarded pilgrims that walk the Camino de Santiago. It's always been part of our soul, is Northwest Spain. We used to live on the coast in the Mediterranean. So there's a couple swords flown around my house. I think my married children took theirs, my 2 older boys. It's funny, my older boy, years ago, I'm like, what are you doing in the basement? He took a diamond stone to sharpen knives, and he's in the basement sharpening his ornamental sword. He's like, Dad, I don't have a weapon. If someone comes to attack our family, I've got to defend ourselves. So we won't talk about defense and offense today. We'll talk about loving and hospitality and caring for people and culture.
I love that. Side conversation we might have to come back to on Spain. Our last guest that we had on, Tim Stoller, is in the process of purchasing this 1,000-year-old castle near Barcelona in Spain. Amy and I have been looking closely at this investment opportunity, and I know you and your wife are planning a trip to Spain this summer. So we're thinking about how to maybe make some stars align, but Spain's on our bucket list.
It was 27 years ago we moved to Spain, one for 4 months, another for a year. I had a baby in between. We took a 4-month-old to Spain, and the Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James, is really, and it's such a great story of hospitality, because you got millions of pilgrims that have walked this journey over the last 1,000 years. It became part of our family journey. So our kids did it when he was 10 months old in a backpack. 2 years later, a 3 and 1 year old, we pushed him in a baby jogger 100 and some miles. And then when they were teenagers, we took back the older boys and did it again. And then my last 2 children, when they were teenagers, we did it again. And since then, my wife has been taking women on these soul care journeys on the Camino. And this summer, because our heart deeply is passionate about loving people and serving them, and specifically in the area of marriage, we're doing a couple couples trips, one in June, and we're going to do a different route. We're going to do the Portugal route, walk along the coast, and then hang out in an island in Portugal for a romantic weekend. And so it's a wonderful place. And speaking of real estate and speaking of development and construction, in 1996, a friend of mine lived in Spain as well. And he walked, I think it was like a month on the Camino de Santiago by himself, and just really sensed, what if we bought a house on the Camino and made it a place where hospitality, and because of our faith background, just the love and mercy and grace allow people to come and rest for a night, pilgrims to come rest. So actually a Colorado businessman, investor, I think gave about $250,000 to this man. They bought an old farmhouse on the historic French route, redid it. It's beautiful. I could see someone like Root Architecture designing it. It's beautiful. It's got a hostel up top, so there's a little place for about 15 pilgrims to sleep. They're the staff that run this little, we call it a refugio, a pilgrim's refuge, can live in the back half. And downstairs is this huge dining room. and pilgrims can come and sleep there for free and eat for free and just spend and talk. And the whole thing is built around conversations. And so that's a story somewhere that might cast some vision for you as well. It's like, what if we bought a house that was about hospitality, about bringing people in, feeding them, letting them rest? There's something powerful about that.
Yeah. And look, I mean, hospitality is not a place, it's a way that we operate, way that we treat people, is the way that we run our businesses. I love your and Christine's heart for reaching out to couples. There's a lot of couples I know that are involved in acumen and kind of crossover in your business, a little bit like Amy and I, that, our marriage is first, but we also do business and life together. I like you and Christine. And I imagine, this trip, is a way of, kind of you guys continuing both your work and your ministry. I mean, I see the way you do life as kind of a blur between that. Why is this important for, entrepreneurial couples to take time to do things like that? And what's the thought behind this trip?
Man, it really stems of, we really sucked at this horribly in our marriage. So year 13, we're in Mexico City, running a nonprofit that was all about hospitality and community and connecting the dots, connecting healthcare and business and government and education and media and faith and community. Yet in our own souls, we were a mess. And pregnant with our fourth, 6 months into us moving there, uprooting our family from Colorado, selling everything we had here. We're in Mexico City. This is home. It's home for a while. My wife says, I don't love you anymore, and I'm leaving you. And so over the next 7 years of journey of marital struggles and a lot of brokenness and healing, it's become a passion of ours to go, why is it so important to help business leaders, to help couples work on themselves, work on their marriage? Because there is a blur. I love the way you said that. There is no dichotomy. It's not, let's do business, let's do hospitality, let's do marriage, let's do parenting. For me, it's all a blur, but it's so interconnected and you can't separate the two. I can't be a great husband and say, well, I've got everything together, and then be a horrible boss in leading companies. Or I can't have a great company that's all about culture and caring for people and developing people and giving them a livable wage. And then I come home and I'm the worst dad ever. There's just integrity is a big word for me. And so I want to be whole. I use the word, often my goal for, I have a purpose statement for my life. It's to disrupt men and women to bring them to a greater sense of wholeness. And I love the word disrupt because it's like, yeah, when I got into Zeke's life, I kind of want to blow up some things. And I want to blow up how he's thinking, because we all have bad patterns. We all have different ways we think. And can we disrupt it, kind of create a little mini healthy bomb? Then we rebuild it. It's built with the goal of being whole. And so I think of neighborhoods as well. Can we drop into a neighborhood? We'll probably move one more time. So the first 20 years of our marriage, we moved 10 times, 3 of them international. It's hard to create community hospitality in those neighborhoods. Since then, 11 years ago, this past week, we moved down to South Denver, and we've been in one spot. And so it's getting to know the neighbors. It's getting to know the neighbor behind us just lost their dog. And we got a text saying the last thing he did, the dog, his last bark, his last movement was to go to the fence and barked at one of my dogs. And then like minutes later, he passed away. But to be able to have that connection with a neighbor is pretty powerful. So for us, all of the hospitality, the neighboring, our next home, the criteria is we don't care if it's a 1-bedroom house, but it has to have a large kitchen. It has to have a gathering place. And so I even love some of the projects that you do, and I see some of your architectural projects. It's about community, and the Red Hotel investment project is having a community space. That's really important to me.
So why is what role does community play in building successful businesses? Why not this charging isolated entrepreneur holding the sword? What makes the difference between those that are doing this together and those that aren't?
That's important. Being alone, and you and I live in Colorado, and you're even in a more individualistic place. You're in Indian Hills, the rustic foothills of Colorado. It's the mountain man. There's a mystique of, I think, the Colorado entrepreneur business leader is, I do it alone. I'm like a mountain man. I can go and look for gold and trap for bears and beavers. And I might be married, But the reality is I'm addicted to the fight and the passion and being alone and trying to figure it out in my own headspace. I describe a business owner also as a crazy wagon train leader. It's still pretty crazy to say we're going to leave St. Louis and we're going to go truck to the West looking for a better future. It's an entrepreneurial dream. We're going to start this. But the wagon train guy says, let's do it together. And I think it's a healthier role to say, let's still start some of these crazy projects. Let's go develop an investment project. Let's go develop a business. Let's buy one. But to do it alone is scary. And we all have seen another place of great community is sitting around a fire. I remember doing this about a year and a half ago because I've got some extroverted kids and I've got some more that are slightly more introverted. And it was my son's 15. It was 2 years ago. My father was in town. My father-in-law was in town. My older sons were all here. We just sat in the front around a fire and I had it blazing and I took a log out and I moved that on fire log. And it was probably about a 4 or 5 foot blaze on my front lawn here in South Denver, probably not safe. And then I moved that log just 4 feet outside the fire pit. And I started asking questions to my son. What's happening? Why is it going out? And it's a great illustration. It's like, I want my sons as leaders to be tied into community. And so if you're a business owner and you don't have community, it's a place to be picked off. That fire log, as much as it was on fire, was just moved 4 feet outside the fire pit. And it already went cold within a minute. It started dying out. So the power of being in this room together, that's what we do in Acumen. I take business owners like yourself. I put you in a room for 5 hours, build community. It feels fake at first because you're like, I don't know that guy. He's in an industry I know nothing about. He's a different age, demographic, place in town, maybe different net worth. I know nothing about him, but we force this community and it's about letting our imposter syndrome down and saying, help me in my business. And I'm not alone. And feeling not alone is pretty important. So there's a phrase we used is taking this rugged individualistic business owner. And it comes from a book, Dr. John Deloney, Building a Non-Anxious Life. And so it's like, that's the alternative of healthy community is people living in anxiety. And one of his principles was you have to have community. He talks about you got to be shoulder to shoulder and knee to knee. And there's a great funny story. So I'm sharing this with a bunch of business owners up in the mountains and we're spending a weekend up there, just really not even talking about business. This is just get away, have fun. We went fly fishing. And I read this quote. And being a Colorado football fan, my son played football there. I worked at CU for a while. Shoulder to shoulder is part of our fight song. Yeah, shoulder to shoulder, fight, fight, fight. That's an easy one. And then this business owner owns a large law firm. He goes, Steve, sit in your chair, put your feet on the ground, put your hands on your knees. And then he pulls up his chair and he touches his knees to mine. And we are standing knee to knee. And I'd never thought of the phrase. I know shoulder to shoulder, but knee to knee. And I can smell his cough drop because we are two 50-some-year-old men. And I'm staring and he's like, okay. And he looks at me. He goes, this is knee to knee. And then he does something that's really hard. He goes, how are you doing? And my first inclination, I'm leading this group. This is he like hijacked my meeting. And my first inclination was to lie. And I said, I'm doing great. And then he goes, and he looks at me, he goes, really? And then I went through going, no, I'm actually anxious about this. I'm wondering about your cough drop. And it's like, people use humor to kind of try to share. So I try to cover with humor. And so I think community is important for business owners. What you're doing, Zeke, at Root, what you and Chad are doing is profound, and your wife, but it's really lonely. And we can even have business partners. I had a business partner, best friend of my life. We started in business together in the sleep industry, and we were coming alongside another gentleman that had experience. He was a good friend of ours, a neighbor. We all shared same faith, yet I didn't have Zeke in my life at the time. Other business owners, I would go with my problems to my business owners, but oftentimes I was the problem or they were the problem. And so we just need a place to really be able to filter and process
I mean, look,
challenges.
Like we all know, like we need community and we need a tribe to do life with, to do business with. And that's it's kind of easy to say, but it's harder done in practice. In different dynamics, relationship, whether it's business partnerships, spouse relationships, employees. I mean, how do you really teach your CEOs to build and to do this well so that at the end of the day, like we're helping each other grow? And, you're going to have conflict as you go through this. But I mean, how do you do that well?
It starts with, does the business owner feel enough pain to say, I need to be part of something like this? 20 years later, after losing my best friend in a partnership just battle, and we were both just not good for each other. People always said, the only partnership, what is the phrase? The partnership that doesn't float is a business partnership. And I'm like, no, because we were young and arrogant and we were moving from the nonprofit world and we had done a lot of projects together. We're like, no, we can do this. It's really hard. So one, it's surfacing pain. And once they realize there's pain and they choose to be in the room with others, that's the first step. They've got to make a choice. I've got a client that was in for about 2 years, had some financial struggles in his business, but now is feeling like he's not allowed back in the room because he feels like a failure. So sometimes we just have to choose to say, I'm going to be in the room. Yes, it's a cost, but then we have to evaluate what's it worth? It's not what's it going to cost me revenue-wise and time to be in a room with somebody. What's it going to be worth 5 years from now to be in that room? Once they're in the room, this is the hardest thing, is let down the imposter syndrome. You got to get emotionally naked around other business leaders in order to see growth in your life. So for example, I had a gentleman on the team for 2 years, always had the answers, was just business, $24 million business, 110 employees, making a great impact. When everybody else would throw challenges up on the board, he had great wisdom on operating systems and people and right seat, wrong person, right seat. Overnight, in the matter, none of us knew, overnight, within one council to the next, declared bankruptcy, shut his business down, laid off everybody. We didn't know because the guard was up. And so it's like, first you got to understand I'm alone. I got to choose to be in a group, let the imposter syndrome down, and then just make it part of your rhythm, because you'll realize I'm not alone. I'm a business owner that desperately needs other business owners in my life to process cash flow, P&Ls, balance sheets, all the blocking and tackling X's and O's of business from people in different industries is helpful because they see it from a different lens. We've got real estate guys helping somebody on the team that's in construction. We've got a lawyer. Lawyers are like the easy one to have on a group because it feels like we're all getting free legal care and we're not paying $700. So we really like lawyers. So yeah, it's
one of the highest anxiety pieces where you definitely want those guys on your team. You don't want them on the other side. And it's kind of like the inside knowledge of like, how worried should I really be about this?
Yeah. And then once you're in the room, you're learning a different sense of community. If I was in the room, I can think of, like, I know I lost a best friend. I can think of $1 million decision that it cost me. In 2016, it cost me $1 million mistake. And then I can't count the number of nights that I was up from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. running a business.
So what did you learn from that? I know you had this, fall through. What was your takeaway from that? How are you, talking to CEOs about doing things different?
It's I lead from a place of brokenness and vulnerability. I am basically an executive coach, a peer advisory facilitator to my former self. I'm 53 right now. It took me some time to look back on those great years of building and impact and change and wealth creation to realize now in my 50s. So I lead from that place. I want to let them know I was you. This is a safe place. And then there's just different tactics. I think it's, I've got one business owner, talented, was like, I don't want to go on the retreat. I don't really care about these people. And so I went, okay, well, it sounds like you'll be ending after your 1 year commitment. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, this ain't for you. This is about other business owners. It's not just about, so I love the progression. If someone joins a group like this or is in a healthy community, typically we go into a community, if it's a faith community, a coaching community, even a fitness community, we join that community because it's all about me.
What's in it for me?
Yeah. I'm going to this gym. I want to get stronger. I want to lose some weight. It's about me. Then we realize as we're there for a little bit, we're like, wait, we're doing this together. That guy joined to lose 10 pounds and get stronger. And so did she. All right, we're doing it together. It's about we. And then if the community gets healthy, it starts becoming about you. Zeke, I'm actually concerned about you. And you mentioned something in our workout that you don't eat before your workout and protein or whatever. So now I start poking you a little bit. But ultimately, the goal of any community that we're part of, and this can translate into a business community, your staff, a club, being a good neighbor in your neighborhood in Indian Hills, it's then ultimately about hopes and dreams. And that's where so it's not just about how's your cash flow, how's your top line revenue, how's your bottom line. The story of who you are you with people that know your hopes and dreams? And so I started noodling I've never been interviewed by a radical hospitality. And so I thought, okay, yeah, where have I experienced it the most? A friend poked me probably 15 years ago when we moved into North Denver. And it was kind of after our recovery of marriage stuff from Mexico City. And we had a lot of hardship there and had our fourth child. We were just starting to see some health. I'm like, I'm going to be a good neighbor. And he wrote a book on neighboring. And he goes, it's like drawing on a piece of paper. You can apply this to your neighborhood. You can apply it to your staff team. So you could put Zeke and Amy in the middle. That's your home. And you know your wife's name. Whew, good job. You know your business partner's name. Do you know your COO's name? Do I know my neighbor's name? Shelby, across the way. And so I got to know the names of people in my company or in my neighborhood or in my business district. And then second thing is, do I know any facts about them? Oh yeah, mid-50s. They just lost their dog. They drive a red Suburban I know their fact is where they grew up, blah, blah, blah. But the key again, then, if you want to have great community in your workplace or in your neighborhood, is start learning the hopes and dreams about who they are. So when we moved into Greenwood Village 11 years ago this week, early on, there's a guy across the street. He came over within the first month, young guy, probably 25, 26 years old. He goes, hey, I did the sprinkler system. I'm in landscaping. I'm like, oh, that's your truck. Chris is landscaping. He goes, yeah. And he lived with his parents there. And he had a black dog. I forget his dog's name. He goes, I did the system. And he goes, let me walk you through it. Because the guy that flipped your home probably didn't tell you all the stuff. And so he walked me through and he goes, oh yeah, there's a zone over here. We didn't install anything, but it's connected. Really wonderful. He started coming over and I love front porch world. I'm a big front porch guy. And so I spend a lot of time on my front porch working, having a cigar, reading, soaking in a little bit of sun that we can get, especially in the winter. I'm like, today is the day I'm going to do this. And he would come over and he'd see me having a cigar and he'd have a cigarette and our dogs would play. Started to get to know his story. Started to get to know he was in the military. He had some serious PTSD and didn't know his parents who live across the street and just really got to know his story. Well, 2 years later, he committed suicide, sadly. And then the hopes and dreams of him quickly translated in getting to know his parents. And they become dear friends. And I've gotten to know their hopes and dreams and the pain. And I know there's a tree planted across the street because of his life. And so I think that's the power of a story is if we're going to do community right, if we're going to do business right, we've got to know people that work for us, work with us, live around us, circle in our hemisphere, get to know their story.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of just answered this question, but I want to ask it anyways, kind of thinking through is, what does radical hospitality mean to you and why does it matter?
It matters because people are lonely. We're in we've got a mental disease epidemic, there's just a crisis here, I think, in the Western world. It matters because people matter. Projects are okay. Wealth creation's okay. But generally, generational relationship and healing and community matters. So radical hospitality matters because people matter. Now, what does it look like? Radical hospitality, man, there's a phrase my wife and I, it's probably on the whiteboard behind us. It says love, serve, grow. So we start with the core principle as we're prospecting, building our business, as I'm looking for new business owners to join our teams. It's all about love. Can I love them? And love for us is unconditional. I'm a faith follower of Jesus Christ. And so for me, unconditional love is the starting point. And so if I can start everything I do in a coaching hour, I coach a business owner this afternoon. I've got to go in it with saying I'm going to love him and I'm going to listen. And then the second thing is serve. Back to the love, serve, grow. That's radical hospitality for me is I'm going to love somebody deeply. And there's a lot of pieces. I'm going to serve them. What best meets their needs? So in the business world, oftentimes it's so transactional. Zeke, I want you to join my team because it's revenue for me. Or Zeke, I come to your happy hour because I know I'm going to meet a business broker and I can do a deal there. And so it's very transactional. But if you can start deeply in your core and settle yourself with radical hospitality, I'm going to love somebody, I'm going to serve them, they will grow and so will you. And so for us in our home or in community centers, kitchens are important. because I think that's where hospitality happens. Breaking bread over a bourbon. That's why it's funny. Our next house will have a large kitchen. It has to have a view of at least one out of one window. It can't look at another house. And so you get into some of the burbs, it's like, oh, there's homes all around us. But at least we have either a cul-de-sac or an end or an open space. And then the other piece, because it's become so much part of our rhythm, kitchen's huge, is a cigar lounge. And people may go, oh my goodness, how crazy. Even my wife goes, the new home has to have a cigar lounge. Because what happens in a cigar lounge, radical hospitality is explosive. People sit, they sit still. There's usually not an activity other than a conversation. And so that's kind of what it looks like. Most people, if you had to have them define on a piece of paper, what is radical hospitality, they'll struggle with words. But you ask them to see it and taste it, they know immediately when they walk in somewhere, there's radical hospitality. They just know it.
I can see this cigar. I have trouble being in a lounge with it all around me. But for Steve and for you, I see this great porch and maybe a stream out and some mountain views. I will definitely come share a cigar with you on that.
I'll probably need someone to design it.
So I'd love to be a part of.
I know a designer. I know an architect firm because we talk all the time. Hey, what's the theme of ours going to be? And I grew up in Southern California. I'm like, no, I don't want a Southern California theme. I love a dream of mine is to have a '66 Chevelle as my first car, and I want to have another one. Maybe the lounge will have like a car garage feel. I'm like, no, it's too metal. My wife is Latina. We've spent some time in a lot of the Latin world. And one of the dream places I still want to go is I want to go to Cuba. And so the heart of cigars is Cuba. So why doesn't my lounge just have a very strong Cuban feel? So we'll never know.
Well, I think Jesus would love to have a cigar with you. And I love how, you again, you kind of blur the line of faith and business and life. What role do you see that, your faith, should as an entrepreneur play in your business? How would Jesus do that? I mean,
well, one, it takes faith just to start a business. If you're dumb enough to start a business, you need a lot of faith because it is crazy. The arrows that come after you as an entrepreneur, a bootstrapper, or you're raising money, it just feels like every day you wake up and there's another attack. And so faith grounds me. I grew up in a faith home, but it didn't really solidify until, yes, I was even a full-time missionary for a while. But what really grounded my faith was when my life fell apart. When my wife says, I'm leaving you and I don't love you. And we're pregnant with our fourth. And my job, my life, we eject out of Mexico City. That was the beginning of a real grounded, deeply rooted faith that says, I need the God of the universe to love me, to transform me. Because I did not feel lovable. I felt like a failure. This is interesting enough. This will give you an idea of how messed up I was and how transformation faith is important to my life and business. So the first 4.5 hour session. So we did 10 sessions in a row every day for 2 weeks, 4.5 hours of counseling. The first session, the counselor lights a candle, lights 3 wicks, and he goes, the triune God is here. There is no shame. Great words. My wife is weeping. Somewhere, this is how hard my heart was. Somewhere in the first hour and a half, I said, can you fix her? That's probably not the right thing. And I think somewhere along the week, he goes, there's a passage in the Old Testament. A wise sage said, there's a prophetic piece in there about you're going to be oaks of righteousness. And our counselor goes, I think your marriage will be oaks of righteousness to others. Others will sit under your feet. And I look at him and I go, you're full of shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on your podcast, but that's the core of what I thought. And it brings us to tears. That was 18 years ago. It brings us to tears how that vision has come true, and it's still coming true. And so faith has transformed everything I've done about my marriage and how I parent my kids. It's changed the language set of how hard marriage was, but the importance of faith and connection and getting whole. I had to go back to counseling 10 years ago, just for me, not for marriage counseling, just for me, because business was hard. It was beating me up. I was losing my identity, my soul. I was finding value in what I did again. And I had to get centered. And so really grateful for the opportunity to see how that's why it becomes this, you're right, it's blur. Creating wealth is part of my faith journey, helping others. I have a deeply passionate calling to help others become extremely successful. That's not just financial. It is a calling of mine as I disrupt men and women to a greater sense of wholeness. The second piece is to help them become successful in what they do and who they are. And so that if they're married, great. If they're single, wonderful. If they're building a business, amazing. Those are kind of my threads of where I see that play out.
Yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability on that. You said it's okay to cuss, and honestly, I don't trust many Christians who don't cuss because I don't feel like they've really gotten the trenches. They've decided to sit on the sidelines and sit in the pews and let things go. One of the things I love about the power of your story is the willingness to be vulnerable about it, to talk about how you get into the trenches, how you've gone through some things, and how the God of the universe has helped you get and grow through that. I repeat this phrase a lot to my kids is, you grow through what you go through. And I feel like, God has called us not to just live passively, but to go through the things that challenge us and pull us. And I think he's more interested in who we're becoming than what we look like to the rest of the world.
And this maybe doesn't work for everybody, but I think the longest lasting companies and leaders have deeply rooted in their souls the idea of faith. Not always, but there's an element of they also surround themselves with people that have gone through the journey. What was that phrase you tell your sons? You grow through what you go through.
What you go through.
Yeah. And so I think as a business owner to be successful, he's putting him. So I had somebody go, a prospective client yesterday goes, I'm hoping this will help me so I can not make the same, or so you can help me through some of the journey. I go, my desire is that you don't make the mistakes that I made. And so for a business owner, it's just be around those that have gone through it so they can grow. Because if we're surrounded by wisdom, there's an old proverb, centuries old proverb says the wisest people, the most successful people are surrounded by a board of advisors. Essentially, that's a paraphrase. And so it's like, okay, so put yourself around a bunch of people that have gone through it. And typically I try to choose people that are older. So I spend a lot of time with a generation of men and women that are 10 to 15 years older than me. And I think the younger generation in their 20s, I think there's been a movement going back to going, hey, we should actually, I don't know if it was the millennial generation that started giving the middle finger to the older generation because they were pissed at the boomers and things like that. But I think this next generation of Zs, and who knows about the alphas because they were just born. But there seems like they're coming back to asking the old guys, the guys with gray, to say, what'd you learn? And we're not telling them just tactics. We're telling them stories, and stories transform.
If I'm a up and coming entrepreneur, how do I be a good mentee and approach a guy like yourself or another business owner that's, a few years down the road, and ask for that help?
That's a great question, because only the national statistics on what I do as a living, we create these peer groups, and there's a bunch of them around like Acumen. 10% of business owners are in peer groups. And so we should go ask those 10% of the people, because as I prospect, 90% of the people that I talk to say, no, it's not for me. One, it's a fee-based thing, but I think through a young business owner is you've got to find something, find as many as you can. Typically the best ones, if you're going to get, for example, if you're going to build your own private board and say, hey, I want you in my business every quarter or twice a year. I want to do a half day or a full day, look at my P&Ls, look at my balance sheets, look at my strategic plan, look at our culture. It's going to cost you some money to pay that person to spend time with you because they're running their own business. And so I think there's an element of you've got to take the initiation. If you can't afford it, find somebody that you can afford it. Just keep looking for wisdom around you.
All right. So let's talk about 2025. I'm an entrepreneur. For entrepreneurs, what do you see as the number one mental block that's keeping entrepreneurs from being successful?
Cash flow. Revenue's great. Growth is great. Let's start creating some cash flow. Let's be efficient with our systems and our operations. 2 years ago, we hosted, was it ITR Economics? I think you may have been there. And this 2 years ago, predicting the great end of the world, Great Depression likes again around 2028 to 2032. And so as we hear that, and we're still 3 to 6 years away from that, how do we prepare? Well, it's either get ready to sell But again, that's cash flow. Cash flow makes a business sell well. So all growth is not equal. So we oftentimes on our monthly CEO council, a problem will get thrown up on the board, and it's about, for example, this week, should I grow and expand to different states? And the other owners were challenging and going, no, the key right now for your growth is just work on your net income. And growth is about being cleaner. And so I think it's about cash flow. It's about just cleaning that up. It's about becoming more efficient. For a small, medium-sized business, oftentimes the business owner is the key salesperson, the key developer. So I would say is make sure you're always working on your cash flow and cleaning it up.
This has been just wonderful catching up, talking. I hope the world gets to experience a little bit of what you have to offer through this conversation. Grateful for you. Love you, brother.
Love you too, brother.
All right. Thanks.